Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I want to take you through how to cut and sew this beautiful sundress with an under bust cut and layered ruffles. The first thing we're going to be working on is the bodice for the dress. So I have my pattern here already drawn out. I have the shoulder line, the chest line, the bust points, under bust points and the half length, while for the back I have just the chest line, the bust points and the back half length line. I'll start with the front pattern. The first thing I'm going to do is take out the suppression, and this will be at the under bust line and the half length line. To do this, I will mark 0.75 inch on both sides of the bust span line. After connecting it with a straight line, I'm going to connect it to the bust point line using the curved part of my ruler. The next thing I'm going to do is take out the shoulder dart. So this will connect from the shoulder all the way to meet with the bust point, and this is to be able to form that cup that will glide into the shoulder and the neckline. For this, I'll be taking 1 inch on both sides of the line dividing the shoulder. So I don't really mind taking out a lot on the shoulder since we are not going to be needing the entire shoulder measurement. So I'm going to use a straight ruler to connect this to the bust point. After taking out the suppression, next thing to do is to take the body measurement. So that's the round measurement, starting with my waist measurement. Whatever you take off, you want to make sure that you replace it at the waist, else you're going to end up having a shortage. For the bust, I'm not going to be taking out anything since we didn't take off anything from the bust point line. So I've gone ahead to take my waist divided by 4 and my bust divided by 4 as well. Now the next thing I want to do is to form that under bust corset cut out. To do this, I'm going to divide the distance between the bust point and the under bust point by 2. So that is where the curve is going to start from. After marking the point, I will use a curve ruler to connect it into the under bust line. This is how yours is expected to look like at this stage. The next thing to do is to draw out the neckline. So I'm just going to use the basic 3-inch wideness for the neck and connect it all the way to this point. The part I have shaded is going to be cut off. So this neckline will be cut off along with the suppressions at the shoulder and the under bust. Before we carry on with the front pattern, let's move on to the back. So the back pattern is very straightforward because all of the measurements have been taken. There are no suppressions for the back pattern. All you have to do is replace the dart allowance at the waist. After doing all of that, the next thing to do is to connect from the armhole here into the center back. So this is completely up to you. You can make it straight, you can make it as low as you want because this is an open back dress. So I just made mine to be in between the chest line and the bust points line, and I use the curvy part of my ruler to connect everything together. So this part here is my zip allowance, and I'm using just 1 inch as my zip allowance. To eliminate zip bulge, you want to come up from the center back by 1 inch and connect this back into the waistline. The next thing I'll do is to add my seam allowance, and for this I'm using just 1.1 inch as the seam allowance, and I'm going to connect this just like I did for the actual measurements. So that will be all for the back pattern. This part I'm shading is going to be cut off, and all of this will not be needed as well. Now back to the front pattern. Remember, this is a backless dress, so we don't really need the armhole for this pattern. However, I want to make sure that my armhole area is well covered so I'll be more comfortable. For that reason, this is how I'm going to connect it. I'm going to connect it from the shoulder point straight into the armhole. Remember that 2 inches have already been taken off for the shoulder dart and 3 inches have been taken off for the neckline. So when we are done joining everything together, you'll see that the shoulder point has just about 2 inches left. Next thing I'm going to do now is take the seam allowance of 1.1 inch. At this point, the pattern is almost complete. I'm just going to cut out everything so you guys can really see where we're at. Before moving on to the next stage, please hold on and observe this. For the top of the back pattern, I added half of an inch for turning. For the front armhole as well, I added half of an inch. So please take note of that when cutting your pattern. The next thing I'll do is to separate the bust part from the waist from the under bust line. Now for this waist part, I'm just going to close the dart to make the sewing process faster, because it's not going to make much difference if you decide to separate the dart and then join it later on. The next thing I'll do is to cut out the suppression, making sure that I'm following the lines that I have shaded. So this shaded part is going to be cut off. Just observe how I'm cutting this out. This is everything for the front. For the back, I'll just go ahead and close out the dart to also fasten up the sewing process. After doing that, the pattern is ready. The next thing I'm going to do is cut all of this on my fabric. My little advice to you is to make sure that the iron close stay to your fabric before cutting. So the material I'm going to be using for this is just my lining fabric and the main fabric. The main fabric I'm using is a flower chiffon material to really give that sundress vibe. So please observe how I'm going to be cutting this so it doesn't confuse you. Let's start with the front. So I've gone ahead to cut the pattern out on my lining fabric, and you can see that I've ironed interface into it. Please make sure you add half an inch seam allowance all round, excluding the side, because we already added 1.1 inch seam allowance. So what I'm cutting now is the padding for the front, just to make sure that I can wear the dress comfortably without putting on a bra. So please observe how I'm doing this. I have a separate tutorial on how to pad a dress, so I'm basically just following that, but you can still just watch how I am doing it here so you can understand a little bit more on how it's done if you haven't watched that video. You just want to make sure that the wording, which is what I'm using here, doesn't extend into the seam allowance line, it doesn't go above the chest line, and it is curved kind of like a half moon shape. It is also important to note that the wording must always stop at the under bust line, regardless of whether or not the under bust is cut out. Always make sure that the wording stops right at the under bust. So for this part, I'm just going to be cutting it out all round, but I'll make sure that it stops right before the chest line. Your choice of wording should always be between the medium thick wording and the light wording. You have no business using the extra hard wording for this process, so please take note of that as well. This is what I have now for the wording, and if you guys paid attention, then you'll notice that I made sure that the one for the center front is stopping exactly where the one for the side front stops at. So I just made a sweetheart cut at the center front so that the wording can have a more flattering look to it. I'm going to repeat the same process for the other side. So I've also cut out the waist area. You guys can see that it looks like a waist belt. Now this is the main fabric I'm using. Because it's transparent, I had to add another lining piece to serve as an interfacing for it, while I also have the main lining piece which will do its job of serving as the lining. Okay, I hope you understand that. So basically I'm cutting 2 pieces each for the lining so that it can cover, so that the first piece can cover the fabric to make it less transparent, while the other one will work as the main lining. I did the same thing for the back here. I have cut out the back on fold, and I have a lining piece underneath to make it less transparent, while this one here that is still attached to the pattern will serve as the main lining piece. If the fabric you are working with is not transparent, then skip this process and just cut on the fabric and then cut on the lining. You do not need to cut it double. The back of this dress is very straightforward. Just place the lining and the fabric right sides facing each other and stitch all round, excluding the waist area. This is to turn the lining and the fabric to make the dress neat on the inside. I'm going to stitch that all around off camera and move on to the front. So the front is where you really need to pay attention. I also cut the lining double for the front. Now the difference is that we're not going to be attaching the main fabric yet because we're going to be draping it. Just watch how it's all going to unravel. So first thing you want to do is to join the center front and the side front together, right sides facing each other, and then just use the 1/2 inch seam allowance you added to join the two together. We're also going to be repeating the same process for the lining. So this one with the wording is going to serve as the interfacing for the main fabric, while the other parts of the lining without the wording ironed to it is going to serve as the main lining. So I'm just going to use my pin to hold it down and then stitch it off camera and repeat the same process for the lining as well. This is what the front is looking like after joining everything together. So let me just explain what I have done. After joining the center front and the side front, I turned the lining and the fabric together, and I did this all round, including at the shoulder points. So you're probably wondering why I did it like this, but you guys will understand why in a minute. So because we are going to be draping the main fabric on it, you want to make sure that the shoulder area is already neat. So now when the draped fabric is attached, everything is going to look neat on the inside. So the same process I have done for the one on the right is what I'm going to repeat for the one on the left. So just want to stitch it all round using 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure that you don't stitch down the under bust area. Also, ensure that you're ironing as you are sewing. The next thing to do is to drape the fabric on the cup area. You want the wideness to be 3 times wider than what the cup wideness is, and the length to be as long as you want it to be. Just make sure that it is long enough to go from your underbust to all around your neck, and also long enough to tie at the back. I'm basically going to gather this up around the underbust here, and then make sure to gather it up towards the shoulder. Before doing that, I just want to sew this part of the fabric to this part of the cup to make sure that it has a finished look around the neckline. So this part of the cup is the neckline area. Don't get it confused. This is the neckline area. Just face right sides together and stitch it, and this is what it will give you. You can see that it's looking very neat now. You can see that the one on the left has been done already. I just want to take you guys through the process. The easiest way to get this done is to run a gather stitch and just gather it up. If you do not want to do that, then you can make tiny pleats and make sure you're ironing it and pinning it down to ensure that the pleats stay in place. However, I prefer to just run a gather stitch and then gather it up this way. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do on this side now. I'm going to first run a gather stitch at the edge here and then pull it to meet with the actual wideness of the cup. I decided to make little pleats while also running a gather stitch to speed up the process and give me a more even pleated look. Okay, so that is optional. You can also decide to just gather it up, but I just want that pleat design to show a bit more and also have the option to adjust it as I want. So this is what it is looking like. You can see that it is all starting to come together. Once again, the cup on the left has gone through the next process, so I just want to show you guys how to achieve that on the right cup. You guys can see that the inside is looking neat because I already turned the lining before adding the draped fabric to it. To achieve that neat look, first you want to pin the draped fabric to the under bust just to ensure that the pleats stay in place. Also, just ensure that your iron is next to you because you'll be needing it to secure the pleats in place. After pinning this part down, then you want to fold in the rough part for the side front. Remember that for the neckline, we already faced right side together and attached the fabric even before gathering it up. So for this side, you just want to fold it in this way. It's going to be covered anyways because it's the side and we're going to be joining it in the back, but you just want to fold it in this way and then use your pin to secure it. After that, go ahead and then top stitch on it to ensure that it stays in place. Now for this part, you just want to gather it up to meet with the shoulder point. So you can see that I am arranging the pleats and I am bringing it all to meet with the shoulder area. Remember I told you when drafting the pattern that shoulder is not going to be more than 2 inches wide because of the suppressions I was taking off and the neckline that was cut out. And I did not replace any of that because I knew that I wanted the shoulder area to be small. You can even take it off more if you want it to be smaller. So for this part, you just want to use your pin to secure it as I am doing on the screen. Just try and mold the fabric. It's a chiffon fabric, so it's very easy to achieve this. And after folding it in, go ahead and top stitch it down so it stays in place. The good thing about this technique is that even the top stitched part is not going to show because the fabric is draped on the cup. So the draped part of the fabric will end up covering up the top stitched area. To ensure that the pleats stay in place, I used my steam iron to press it down. So to make this easier, just grab your tailor's ham and place it underneath the cup before ironing so that you are still able to mold the cup to form properly. But this is just me adjusting the pleats to make sure that it's showing properly even after ironing. After this process, the next thing to do is to join the entire front bodice together. To join this, I'm going to be doing something called the sandwich method. So the right side for the busts and the waist area should meet. I'm just going to turn it this way. Then I'll bring the lining underneath to face with the right side of the lining. So the right side of the lining piece will also be facing each other, and you just want the cup to be in between, and make sure that all of the points for the main fabric and the lining match. The only way to achieve this is to pin it down. If you are a beginner, ensure that you pin this down before proceeding to sew it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin it all around so it's easy for you guys to understand what's going on. The cup is basically in between the lining and the main fabric for the waist to ensure that it has a very neat inseam finishing after joining. The easiest way to sew this is to first sew one part of the cup before moving on to the other side, because there's going to be a lot of tension and a lot of push and pull. So after joining one side of the cup, go ahead and pin the other side and join it as well. I have gone ahead to join it, and this is what I have. You guys can see the tension I was talking about here. Thing is that after flipping over to the right side, that tension is already gone. Now the next thing to do is to close up the side. Remember that for the cup area, the side has already been closed with a 1/2 inch. However, that has not been done for the waist. So I'm going to be doing that now. I'm just going to place it this way, still right sides for the lining and the main fabric facing each other. This time make sure that the cup is not getting in the way so you don't sew it along when joining the sides. So now that I've sewn it, this is what I have, and you guys can see that this is so neat on the inside and on the outside. So the only rough part we have now is on the waist area. Please ensure that you notch all of these points, especially that curvy area, before ironing. It will help the dress to relax better. The next thing to do is to join the front and the back together, and for this you just want to place the side back and the side front together and stitch it down using the seam allowance. However, it's always advisable to retake your body measurement before taking out the exact seam allowance. After joining the sides together, the next thing to do is to add boning. This is completely optional. Now, to do this, the easiest thing to do is to just divide the back into two. So to make it easy to do, I'm just going to use my iron to make the lines visible. For the front, I'm going to be folding it in half to get the midpoint and use my iron to press it down. After doing that, I would repeat the same process, divide it into two again. So I'm going to make the side to meet with the center front to get another line, and repeat the same thing on the other side. With that, I've been able to get my boning line. For the back, you can see that the crease line is there. I just used my chalk to make it more visible for you guys to see. The boning lines are not much because I mainly need it for structure. Now, to create the boning channel, I'm just going to run a stitch holding both the main fabric and the lining together. So after sewing one line, I would sew another straight line half of an inch away to accommodate the wideness of the boning. And this is what I have now. You guys can see the boning channel is half of an inch wide. If you are using something smaller, then just measure the wideness of the boning before using it. Now I'm going to go ahead and insert the boning. There are two types of boning. There's the sewable boning and there's the plastic boning. I'm going to be using the plastic boning for this. So you just want to measure the plastic boning to be half of an inch shorter than what you have created as the boning channel. Then go ahead and melt the edges so that it doesn't tear your fabric. Okay, so this is it here. You can see that it's not going into the joining allowance. Now I'm just going to go ahead and insert it in between the lining and the fabric. It's as simple as that. And with this, the next thing to do is to join the skirt and the bodice together. I have not showed you guys the skirt parts of this tutorial, so we're going to get right into that, and I'm going to be using an illustration to make it easy for you guys to understand. So first thing to note is that the base of the skirt is a 180-degree flare that is equal to the wideness of the waist. Now, before attaching it, let me show you guys a little illustration on how to get this done. I'm doing this on a piece of paper because it will be easier to understand. If I do it directly on the fabric, you guys will not get it. So the first thing to note is that a layered skirt needs to have a base before placing the layers, and it is best to make sure that the base is a circle flare, so it can be 180, 90 or 360, even 720, depending on the effect you are going for. But I recommend using at least 180-degree flare, which is what I have here. So you're just going to cut out a 180-degree skirt as the base, and for the base I'm using lining, then the main fabric will be used as the layers. So let's assume that this is the lining and then this is going to be the layers for the skirt. So first thing you want to determine is your waist measurements, and then use that to cut out the flare, and also the length that you want the dress to be, which will obviously be the length minus half length, because the half length has been cut out already. What I did next on the lining was to shorten it by 2 inches. So the total length of the skirt I am working with is 19 inches, and I minus 2 inches from that, which is leaving me with 17. So my total lining length is 17 inches. That's because I don't want the lining and the layer to be on the same level, to make sure that the main fabric itself covers it properly. So I cut that out. The next thing I did was to get the full length of the skirt, which is 19 inches, and then I divided it into three. That is because the number of layers I want is three. If you want like 5 layers, you divide the length of the skirt, in this case is 19, you divide it by 5. If you want 6, divide 19 by 6. That is how you're going to get the layers of the skirts. So 19 divided by 3 just gave me roughly 6.5. So I used 6.5. Now, before you cut out this 6.5, you are going to add 1 inch, which is going to be the seam allowance for hemming and for joining. So 6.5 plus 1 gives me 7.5, which is what I'm using in total. So you're not just going to use this entire 7.5. So you need to add something to it. But before I do that, let me just show you guys what I have done. So you want to cut out the layers straight like this. You can either cut it straight or cut it as a flounce for more fullness. I already have a tutorial on how to cut out a flounce, but in my case I just cut out a very long strip of fabric to the wideness that I want, and then gathered it up before attaching it to the edge. So assuming this is layer 1, let's just focus on this area. And then this is layer 2. I know this one is wider, but I'll show you why later. You cannot just put layer 2 right under layer 1. It has to come up inside a bit more. So if it goes in under this, like this, you will notice that it's now shorter. You can see this, the second layer is now shorter than the first layer. So the other layers that come after the first has to overlap. It has to go in a bit. So that is why this other layer is wider than the first two. So this one, the first layer, is the one that will be attached to the waist. You're just going to attach it to the waist. It's because you're not overlapping this one with anyone, you use the exact measurement. So in my case is 7.5. Then the other two, you're going to add 2 inches to it. So you push it in by 2 inches, and after doing that, you're going to end up having 7.5. So 7.5 plus 2, that will give me 9.5. So let's assume that this is 7.5 and these other ones is 9.5. So if you want more layers, the rest of them will be 9.5. While the first one, which will not be overlapping with any other, will just be 7.5. So this is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Now to attach it, remember that the total is 7.5. So I've gone ahead to do this in such a way that everything will be equal. So I'm using 1.5 as the distance for each of the layer. So you know that this last one, you have to shorten the lining. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So to draw the line on the base itself, you need to determine, you're going to use the exact measurements, excluding all of the allowance, excluding the 1 inch joining allowance and the 2 inch allowance for overlapping. So it's that exact 6.5 that you're going to measure. So let's assume that 1.5 is representing 6.5. So we'll stick 1.5 here. Sorry, before you mark this, you're going to need to mark out the joining allowance, and I'm using 0.3 to represent that. I'm going to first of all mark out the joining allowance. This is for joining the skirt to the half length. Then you're going to come and mark out that 1.5. So this is it, 1.5, and this last one to 1.5. Then come and do the same thing here. So guys, this is it. You can see that this is looking complete, this is complete, but this other side is looking small. That is because I already cut off from the lining. I already cut off 2 inches from the lining so that the layer will be able to cover up the lining. So this last one is not, it's just going to come here. It's going to start from here. You're just going to place it this way and stitch. Remember, you have not yet attached it, so you don't have to face it like this to cover up the rough edge. Face it with the rough edge as it is. As you guys can see, this is stopping right on the line. So it will be wrong to start the other one right where this one stops. So this is why you are going to need to come up by 2 inches on the main fabric. Everything I'm explaining, just assume to be done on the main fabric, okay? I'm going to come now, and this is now the main one. Let me use green to represent it. So instead of starting from here, you're going to come up by 2 inches from this line. That is where the next ruffle will start. Okay? So let me do it all round. This is just a rough sketch, but make sure you are measuring it. Now when it's time to join the sides, everything will be equal. And then you're also going to come up by 2 inches from this side. So let's just assume that this is 2 inches. Okay? So I'm going to attach this one. And this one, where you're attaching it, you face it this way before you attach, so that the rough edge will cover up. But let me just pin it this way because it is on paper. So as you can see, this one is now properly covering the other one, while this second layer stops right on the main line where it's meant to stop. So this is exactly what you want, and then you're going to repeat the same thing for this last one. As you can see, this last one, it's covering up the lining. This is exactly what you want to go for. So I'm going to go ahead and also pin it. So you can see that each of the layers, they look equal, despite these two being longer than the first, because of the calculation that was done to make sure that it's all okay. This is how you want yours to be. You want the next to be a little bit underneath, so have a really nice look. So I'm going to finish up the rest so you guys can really see what I mean, then I'll show you the actual dress. So guys, I've gone ahead to pin everything down, and as you can see, I have tried my best to illustrate this thing for you guys to understand. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this is longer than this, and this is longer than this. I don't know if any of you guys have figured out why, but I'm going to mention it now. The reason is because the piece of fabric I showed you guys all had equal lengths. So whenever I want to do this, you want to make sure that the one for this is not the same as the one for the rest of this. That's because if you measure what you have on the waist, measure what you have here, and measure what you have here, you notice that this is longer than this, and this is longer than this. So whatever you have here, for the next one is going to be this plus half of it. So if the total of here is 20, then this will be 20 plus half of 20, 30. So this will be 30. And if this is 30, then this will be 30 plus half, which will be 45, plus half of 30 is 15. So you have to keep increasing each of the fabric because the next layer is always wider than the last. So that's why the fabric couldn't cover up the whole of this place. So keep that in mind so you don't make this kind of mistake on your actual fabric. I intentionally made it this way for you guys to see it in real time. So I really hope that this explanation helped you guys to make your own layered skirt. I'm gone ahead to do mine, and I just want to show you. So this is actually the finished dress. I know we are not done yet with the tutorial, but don't worry, I'll still show you guys the process. So this is the dress already complete, and if I open it up for you guys to see, you can see that it is neat, right? That's because remember I said you should place it this way and stitch before you turn it like this to give it a neat look. And you can see that this, I said it should be 6, but if I bring it this way, you can see that this is where it stopped, the 6 stopped, but this is where the other layer started from. Same thing with this one, okay? Lining. So it's very important that you mark this out on the lining before you go ahead to sew, so that when you close off the back, everything will be equal. You can see the neckline is equal, the waistline is equal, and then the joining, each of them, they are equal as well. I hope the explanation in that video really helped you guys to understand how I made the skirt part of this dress. Now let's backtrack a little bit, and now let me take you guys through how to attach this together. So you just want to face right sides together and pin it, making sure that the waist for the bodice and the waist for the skirt is equal. Because I'm not doubling the lining for this, I'm not using the sandwich method. However, I would actually advise you use the sandwich method to also achieve an inseam look for the joining. So if you want to do the sandwich method, then you have another piece of lining, that will be covering the bodice, so the bodice is in between the main fabric and the lining to cover up the rough edge. However, I'm just going to be using the serger to cover up the rough edges. Now I'm going to go ahead and stitch this. After stitching it, next thing to do is to attach the zip and close up the back. With that, the dress is ready. I hope this tutorial was helpful and you guys are able to create something similar and even more beautiful. If you have any questions, as usual, leave them in the comments section and I'll make sure to respond. Thank you guys for watching, and please subscribe for more videos. I have about 3 more tutorials on sundresses coming up, so if you're interested in this series, make sure to stay tuned by clicking on the bell button. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and share it with your friends. Thank you for watching. Bye.